We may finally get that World Series that we almost got in 1969 and 1997. Meanwhile, what is it about pulling poor Blake Snell out of big games?
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you don't believe me, how could I have that lower third right there where I'm called Sully? I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who's been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now, and this is wrapping up. We only have about 10, 11 games left to go in the regular season, my fifth full season here at the Lockdown Podcast Network. That's unbelievable. That's right. The Nationals won the first year. Then there was the COVID year. Braves, Astros. Yeah, God, time flies. Time flies. Follow us at Lockdown MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever the hell it's called now. And Instagram, I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell people you don't like. Tell people you do like. Tell your families. Argue about me over the breakfast nook. That's all out there. Hey, this episode is being dropped on the 20th day of September, which means we are now it's technically still summer. So so tomorrow, I guess, is the first day of fall. So there you go. And also, one last little piece to bring up that this episode is brought to you in part by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics to treat 50 some odd infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Let's take care of one little piece of business before we get going here. The trivia question I had was, which two current members of the Baseball Hall of Fame hit walk-off hits to clinch the World Series? There have been several World Series that have ended on a walk-off hit, and two of them were walk-off hits by people currently in the Baseball Hall of Fame. John Murphy Jr. and Court Stell both got the answer correct. The one that I think most people know is Bill Mazeroski, who hit the walk-off home run against the Yankees. The other one was Goose Goslin in 1935, who got the walk-off hit as a member of the Tigers. He had previously been in the World Series with the Washington Senators, but he was part of the Tigers, and he drove in a future Hall of Famer in Mickey Cochran. So there you go. Interesting fact that when Joe Carter hit his walk-off home run in the 1993 World Series, the two people on base are currently in the Hall of Fame, Ricky Henderson and Paul Molitor. I guess that could have been a trivia question for later, but there you go. So there you go. Good job for you for getting those correct. There's a couple of big games happen on in baseball. We're going to get a little bit into the Wild Wild West, the fact that we have about 10, 11 games to go, and the three top teams in the American League West are all tied in the loss column. And the wild thing about that, amongst many things, is any one of those teams, Seattle, Texas, or Houston, could wind up winning the division, skipping the wild card round, and having a home field advantage in the division series. And they are also equally likely to miss the playoffs altogether. So this is going to be a fantastic final 10 games. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. For those of you who follow me at Sully Baseball on Twitter and Instagram, or on also the Locked On MLB, know that I do a thing called the Summer Score, where I keep track of the teams. I basically think it's insane to look at the standings before Memorial Day. Before Memorial Day, it's just too early. It is too early to do it. And after Memorial Day, I start to keep track of when teams are in position for a playoff spot. And I create a tally and I weigh the games. If you're in a playoff spot in August or September, that's more exciting for a fan base than being in June or July. Well, there's some, I've been keeping track of it as I do starting May 30th. That was the day after Memorial Day, right up until today. And there are some teams that have good, triple digit summer scores. A couple of teams like the Angels and the Mets and the Pirates have summer scores, which I bet you forgot they even were in position for a playoff spot after Memorial Day. But 4 teams are going to have a perfect summer score. In other words, every single day after Memorial Day, these 4 teams were in position for a playoff spot. So, and they've all clinched, all 4 of these teams have clinched a playoff position for good. So they, in essence, have given their fan bases a perfect summer. Tampa Bay Rays, Baltimore Orioles, Los Angeles Dodgers, Atlanta Braves. Those 4 teams have been in a playoff spot every single day since Memorial Day. And those fans, every morning they woke up, hey, are we a playoff team? Every day. Now, the Astros fell out for a little bit. The Twins fell out for a little bit. There's some had really high scores, but those are the only 4 that are the currently, or that will finish with a perfect score. And all of them are starting to look like they're gearing themselves up for the playoffs in a couple of weeks. The Rays beat up the Angels. The Angels, they're nothing right now. And it was 6-2 in Tampa Bay. The Los Angeles Dodgers got a walk-off victory right down the street from where I am right now. Max Muncy got the walk-off hit. It's funny, Max Muncy is not having a very good year, and yet every time I look at the highlights, he has the game-winning hit. I don't know how it happens. There you go. But the 2 teams that right now look like, they've had the perfect summer, and they may have had a little dip here or there, but they look like they are getting themselves completely up to speed, are the Atlanta Braves and the Baltimore Orioles. Now, talk about the Braves for a second. Spencer Strider had another fantastic game, another double-digit strikeout total. He would certainly be a front runner for the National League Cy Young. It's interesting. Zach Gallen was the front runner for a long time. Strider looks like he was putting up a great case. We're going to talk about the person who basically clinched it today. But today the Braves played not a bad opponent, but they took on the Phillies, a playoff team, unless we forget the defending National League champion. Spencer Strider was terrific, and the Braves tripled up the Phillies. It was 9-3, and one of the big reasons why the Braves won it is Ronald Acuna Jr. And Acuna, 3 hits, couple of home runs. He's inching closer to that, and he stole his 67th base, and he hit 2 home runs, so he's at 39 home runs. So he is about to become a 40-60 man. He needs just one more home run in the last 10, 11 games, and he will be in the 40-60 club. As I said, he got 3 hits. His OPS for the season is over 1,000. Freddie Freeman's having a terrific year. Mookie Betts is having a terrific year. There's some other people having a terrific year, but I think this game, especially against the Phillies, a team that is a playoff team, especially, by the way, Michael Lorenzen is pitching out of the bullpen. Remember, the Phillies acquired him. He threw a no-hitter in his first home game, and he looked like they picked up an ace, and now he's pitching out of the bullpen. Life can be strange. But, they played a good team who has something to play for. And the Braves are essentially playing out the string, and the Braves are showing, okay, everyone, let's cut out the nonsense. The Braves have won 97 games, and they're almost a cinch to win 100. The other team that showed, hey, we got something, even though they've clinched a playoff spot, and they have earned the right to rest their starters, are the Orioles, who once again showed that they are for real. I am a believer. Those of you who think I'm not giving them their due. And right now, they beat up the Astros. And beat up is maybe that's strong, because it was a very close game, and then the Orioles scored a couple of runs later on to sort of pad the score 9-5. Is that any way to make a living? But the final score just showed that the Orioles, they had O'Hearn has been on an absolute tear for them the last couple of games, and they also have shown that Henderson has been, who's probably the front runner to win the Rookie of the Year right now, played some just dazzling defense, and right now it looks like it'll be an Orioles Braves World Series. And that almost happened 2 other times in baseball history. The first ever championship series year was 1969, where the Cubs famously crashed down the stretch. The Mets overtook the Cubs in the last month, won the division, and the Miracle Mets won the World Series. And they beat one of the great teams to not win the World Series in baseball history with Frank Robinson, Brooks Robinson, that Orioles team with Mike Cuellar, Jim Palmer, Dave McNally, Boog Powell, Earl Weaver managing. It was a stupendous team. But the team that the Mets beat, it was the first ever time they had the league championship series. The team that the Mets beat were the Atlanta Braves, who had just a couple of years before moved from Milwaukee to Atlanta, and for reasons that I've never understood, were in the Western Division. And that should have been addressed the very first year. The first freaking year of the NLCS, when it was Atlanta of the West is playing New York of the East. Okay, have that be a weird thing that happened the first year that they did it and then never did it again. But no, alas, they had the Braves in the West. And that Braves team, managed by Lum Harris, was a team that was filled with Hall of Famers and really great players. Obviously, Henry Aaron was, a tremendous star in that team. He hit 44 home runs that year, had an OPS over 1,000, and that was a pitcher's era. They also had another Hall of Famer in Orlando Cepeda, who they had acquired from the St. Louis Cardinals by way of the Giants. A couple other veterans associated with other teams like Felipe Alou and Clete Boyer were on that team. It was a very strong team. And also Tito Francona, the father of Terry Francona, was on the team. Another Hall of Famer who was there was Phil Niekro, was the ace of that. And I think it's strange. Milt Pappas was on that team. Now, Milt Pappas was a quality pitcher, wound up throwing a no-hitter while a member of the Cubs. I think a lot of people know that he was involved in in a very controversial trade, the one that I'm getting this right? That he was involved in the Frank Robinson trade, when the Reds traded away Frank Robinson, saying he was at the end of his career, and he was traded from Milt Pappas, and that, needless to say, didn't work out so well. We'll get back to trades of Hall of Famers a little bit later, but those two teams, that Oriole team and that Brave team, did not meet up. And I think that would have been a fabulous, fabulous matchup of potential teams. The other time it almost happened was 1997, when the Bobby Cox Braves were at full strength. Glavine, Maddox, Smoltz, Fred McGriff, Chipper Jones. Think about it. The Hall of Famers just rattled off right there. Andrew Jones was on that team. Dave Justice was not. That was the one weird year they had Kenny Lofton in there. But it was a marvelous team that they had, 100-win team and everything. And the Orioles had Ripken, they had Rafael Palmeiro, they had the feel-good story of Eric Davis coming back from cancer, they had future Hall of Famer Mike Mussina, but the Orioles were upset by Cleveland, and the Braves were upset by the Florida Marlins, giving us one of the absolute strangest matchups in World Series history. But those two times we were denied an Atlanta and Baltimore World Series. Maybe, just maybe, this is the year we're going to get that matchup. And if the way they're playing are any indication, brother, this should be pretty good. Let's talk a little bit about our friends at Sleeper. Now look it, time is running out to bet on Sleeper because the Major League Baseball playoffs are around the corner. And if you want 100 times your cash on daily fantasy baseball, this is the time to do it. It's never been more exciting. If you have players like Ronald Acuna Jr., you got Spencer Strider. We're going to bring up Blake Snell in just a minute. Do you know what? You go to Sleeper and you pick more or less on stars like that with stats like home runs, hits, strikeouts, and more for a 100x payout. I found out you're supposed to say 100x payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right, and you can win big. Use promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Sleeper, do you know what it is? It's time to win some money. Ronald Acuna Jr. today clinched the National League MVP. Blake Snell today clinched the National League Cy Young Award. It was just a couple of days ago. It just seemed like, wow, who's going to win? Who's going to win it? And, Snell is just having a phenomenal season. Going into today's game against the Colorado Rockies, he went in with an ERA of 2.43, 217 strikeouts in 167 innings with only 93 walks. I don't look at his win-loss record because I don't care about the win-loss record, but it's 14-9 if you like that sort of thing. And then, that's what he had going into today's game. And I'll explain another reason in a minute why I do not care about a pitcher's win-loss record. But today, all right, he walked 4 batters. Okay. Pitched 7 innings, struck out 10. That's got to help your strikeout to innings pitch. But what about your hits? Well, he let up 0 hits. What about his earned runs? He let up 0 earned runs. And he pitched 7 glorious innings and was lifted as Suarez came in to pitch the 7th. And Hader came in, let up 2 soft hits in the 9th inning. But then Xander Bogaerts hit the walk-off home run, and the Padres won the game. All right. I'm going to bring up a couple of things here. First thing, Hader got the win. It was his first win of the season. And, Hader's having a good season with the San Diego Padres. But what does that win mean? When you look at a win-loss record, when you break down this game, what are you going to say? Hader got the win. He won that game, pitching 1 inning, letting up the only 2 hits the Rockies got. Hader wound up throwing how many? He wound up throwing 13 pitches. He got the win. Snell did not get the win. He was throwing a no-hitter. He never let up a hit over 7 shutout innings. And yet, what I'm trying to figure out, his ERA was lowered to 2.33. His strikeout total increased to 220, whatever it is. But his win-loss record stayed the same. If that's not an indication of how meaningless that stat is, I don't know anyone's even clinging to that whatsoever. I think they should have, and I've said this before, they should not list the win-loss record when they put in today's probable starters. They should list what their average line would be. That's what they should do. The average line. What do they normally pitch in a game? And, you look at just right now. I'm just going to do this quickly. I wasn't even expecting to do this, but I just think of it right now. 167 innings over 30. That means Blake Snell pitches about 5 2/3 innings a start and a couple earned runs per start is kind of what he does. That's going to be increased as he gets to pitch 7 innings today. I got to ask a couple of questions here. All right. It's Padres Rockies. I understand pulling Blake Snell if the Padres were in it. And again, this is a weird Padres team because it looks like they got great pitching performance. They got a good closer. They got big hit bats in their lineup. Why do they still have a losing record? This is Padres Rockies. And you could say this is Snell's last start. He probably has 1 more start at the most 2. But if this was his last start, I don't think anyone would object. So what do you get taking him out after 7? I'm serious. Well, what's the point? Why does this have to be, we're saving his arm? For what? It's late September. In a minute, it's going to be October, and the Padres will be playing golf. Why not let him have a chance to finish out his no hitter? You know, or at least I cannot, and I completely understand if he comes out in the eighth inning, lets up hit. Okay, you're out, scram. But what is it about taking Blake Snell out? Why does everyone want to take him out? Remember, he was pitching a masterpiece with a season on the line for the Tampa Bay Rays, and someone carried the one in their calculations. It's time to take him out, and they took him out, even though he was throwing a masterpiece. And they brought in poor Anderson, who was gassed, and everyone on the planet Earth knew one of the worst decisions in the history of the World Series had just taken place, and it cost the Tampa Bay Rays a legitimate shot to send that World Series to Game 7. But not that much was on the line in this game. Have him come out in the eighth. Have him come out. I mean, this isn't even me being bravado. Like, my day when they went 12, even if the game was over. I don't care about that. But in this situation, what are we saving him for? What's going on here? But either way, he's going to win the Cy Young Award. It is an absolutely tremendous performance, and one that you know what? It's going to be one where he is a tremendous ace pitcher for the San Diego Padres. And I can't help but wonder if he should have stayed with the freaking Tampa Bay Rays. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't remember what the Rays got for him. All I know is his final game in a Rays uniform was walking off the field like going, why am I being taken out? I'm in the process of saving the season. Remind me why I'm not pitching until my arm falls off at this point. Now, remember, he won the Cy Young Award in 2018, and he's going to win the Cy Young Award this year. And, it's going to be a situation where he is going to be one of those strange multiple Cy Young Awards. All right, they got Francisco Mejia, Luis Patino, Cole Wilcox, and Blake Hunt. Now, the Padres got the better of that deal. They did. The Rays could certainly use this guy. Let him finish it up. Just give him the shot, would you? Okay, let's talk a little bit about our friends at Jase Medical. Modern medical care and treatment are important, but our global supply chains, they're fragile. Things like pandemics, natural disasters, and foreign aid, they may cut you off from the treatment that you need. Jace Medical is your solution. And guess what? It can be done online. All right? People may be in situations where they're cut off from the doctors, they're cut off from the medications they need, and they can't get appointments for days. Well, with all the barriers in front of you, Jace Medical creates your solutions. Go online, fill out a form, then you can get prescription life-saving medication delivered right to your door. The Jace case gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to the medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right. By the way, just doing a couple of the quick notes here. The West is absolutely insane. I mentioned the Astros lost to the Orioles. The Red Sox, who are just, I guess they decided this is extended spring training right now. So they're not really putting up much of an effort, even though they wound up tying the game relatively late, but the Rangers wound up winning that game. And Seattle slapped around Oakland 7-2. J.P. Crawford got the big home run in that one. And with that, you have 3 teams tied in the loss column. It's phenomenal. You got less than 2 weeks to go. And as I said, one of them could get home field advantage. The other could be completely out of the playoffs, and partly because Toronto has showed up for business. And Toronto had a great series against the Red Sox, and they come right out and they're showing that they've got it against the Yankees. Kikuchi played a good game. Springer led off the entire game with a home run. And Bichette played great defense and got a big home run. And so Toronto waking up, because they were dead from the neck up just a couple of weeks ago. Toronto, who now have the second wild card spot behind Tampa and are ahead of Seattle and Texas. So one of those teams is not. You have Houston, Seattle, Texas, Toronto. Two of those teams are not making the playoffs. You do know that, right? Two of those teams are going to be the outside looking in. So we're going to see what happens here. But no, at least one of them. Hold on, wait a minute. Okay, at least one of them. Okay, at least one of them. Okay, I got that one wrong. But good for them for hanging on. And hey, good for the Marlins too. The Marlins wound up winning a game against the Mets. It was a hard fought game, and with that, the Marlins are they are half a game behind the Chicago Cubs, who are half a game behind the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they're half a game ahead of the Reds. So right now, the Marlins are on the outside looking in. But if they could, they dusted themselves off from a very tough loss yesterday, and they're going out again today with Perez going up against Senga. Senga's been pitching very, very well for the Mets, and the Mets could be playing a big spoiler role. Braves are playing an afternoon game. Reds and Twins has a huge impact on the playoffs for both teams. Twins are looking to clinch, and the Reds are looking to hold on. So we're going to see what happens. We're going to see what happens. And before we do that, before we move on, I am going to throw out today's trivia, which again has to do with trading prospects and big players involved in trades. Doyle Alexander had a wonderful career, pitched in the World Series, pitched in the playoffs, pitched for several teams, and was famously acquired by the Detroit Tigers in a trade that looked like a phenomenal success when it happened, because he went 9-0. The Tigers seemed to win every game that he started, and the Tigers won the division on the final game of the season. So it looked like an absolute phenomenal deal for the Detroit Tigers. Unfortunately, the young player they gave up for him was future Hall of Famer John Smoltz. So that came back to haunt the Tigers. So Doyle Alexander was involved in a trade for one Hall of Famer. Doyle Alexander was also involved in a trade for another Hall of Famer earlier in his career, where he was the young player acquired in a move involving a Hall of Famer. Who was the first Hall of Famer that Doyle Alexander was involved in a trade with? He was traded for John Smoltz later in his career, but earlier in his career, he was involved in a trade featuring which Hall of Famer? That is today's trivia question. What is it about Doyle Alexander and Hall of Famers? Well, that's what we're going to find out. Post the answers here on the YouTube page or everywhere else. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Solly at Solly Baseball on Twitter, Solly Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Seeing if we're going to party like we almost did in 69 and 97. This has been Locked On MLB for the 20th day of September 2023. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.